Earlier today, Donald Trump had a full blown public meltdown and threatened to unlawfully fire a man whom he appointed to a key position in the federal government, Jerome Powell of the Federal Reserve, who recently expressed to the American people that he would not succumb to Trump's political pressure to change monetary policy in the United States. In other words, Trump is triggered that a Trump appointee is showing a spine and giving him the finger, and you love to see it. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we got a clip or two to look at here, and I definitely want to show you the Trump meltdown. But first things first, I am back. It seems like I've only been gone for a day or maybe a year. Just moved into a new residence. We're setting up the home studio here. It's a work in progress, so just please bear with me. Now let's get to the good stuff. Donald Trump's meltdown. So he says the ECB is expected to cut interest rates for the seventh time, and yet too late, Jerome Powell of the Fed, who is always too late and wrong, yesterday issued a report which was another and typical complete mess. Oil prices are down, groceries, even eggs are down, and the USA is getting rich on tariffs. Only one of those things is true, by the way, the oil prices. We'll get into that in a second. Too late should have lowered interest rates like the ECB long ago, but he certainly can lower them now. Powell's termination cannot come fast enough, again suggesting that he would fire Jerome Powell. So oil prices are down, but that's because the global oil markets is expecting a recession, a Trump-triggered recession. That's not good news. Grocery prices are still pretty high. What was the other thing he mentioned? Oh, and the USA is getting rich on tariffs. Again, it's going to be the end consumer who pays the price for Trump's tariffs. So again, total BS from Donald Trump. But he's upset because Jerome Powell took an indirect shot at him, suggesting that he would not succumb to political pressure to change monetary policy. So let's look at what Chairman Powell actually said. And just for context, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell offered a gloomy outlook for the U.S. economy while speaking at the Economic Club of Chicago on Wednesday and pointed to Donald Trump's tariffs as being both unprecedented and very likely to hurt economic growth and cause higher inflation. So let's take a look at this clip, and we'll see you on the other side.
Let me turn to Fed independence. You've reiterated that you intend to stay in office until the end of your term, and that certainly reassured many in financial markets. What are the levers the government or the legislature have to pressure the Fed? And should one worry about threats to the Fed's independence once you're gone?
So our independence is a matter of law. Congress has, in our statute, we're not removable except for cause. We serve very long terms, seemingly endless terms. So we're protected in the law. So, Congress could change that law, but I don't think there's any danger of that. Fed independence has pretty broad support across both political parties and in both sides of the Hill. So I think that's not a problem. There's a Supreme Court case people will have read, probably in today's journal, at which the Supreme Court may decide whether independent agencies generally, whether their authorizing laws can contain a provision that prevents the president from firing members of a commission other than for cause. And that's a case that people are talking about a lot. I don't think that decision will apply to the Fed, but I don't know. But it's a situation that we're monitoring carefully. Generally speaking, Fed independence is very widely understood and supported in Washington, in Congress, where it really matters. And the point is, we can make our decisions, and we will only make our decisions based on our best thinking, based on our best analysis of the data about what is the way to achieve our dual mandate goals as we can to best serve the American people. That's the only thing we're ever going to do. We're never going to be influenced by any political pressure. People can say whatever they want. That's fine. That's not a problem. But we will do what we do strictly without consideration of political or any other extraneous factors.
People are happy about that, and people should be happy about that. People on both sides of the aisle should be happy about that. Republicans shouldn't want a Democratic appointee to be making monetary decisions based on what's politically expedient for the Democratic Party, and vice versa. That's why Trump needs to think about this very carefully. Of course, the problem is that Trump and MAGA Republicans very rarely think carefully about anything. It's all about reflex and id and what's, about a short-term gain. So again, Jerome Powell is not offering any sort of sunny disposition regarding the state of the economy because of the Trump-triggered economic catastrophes that we've all been living through, and rather that this channel has been discussing, as well as other channels as well. He mentioned the Wall Street Journal, and I like quoting the Wall Street Journal, especially when they go after Trump, because again, as I've said it before and I'll say it again, we will continue to criticize Donald Trump because I think it's good, I think it's right, but I'm a liberal, I'm a progressive, I'm a Democrat, right? So, people who are Trump inclined already find me unpersuasive, right? Because they want to own the libs, and I'm a lib, right? So they're more inclined probably to dig their heels in. So with that in mind, what does the conservative Wall Street Journal have to say about this? So Trump lashes out at Powell, says termination cannot come fast enough. Powell warned Wednesday that the Fed could face a difficult trade-off as tariffs raise prices and weaken the economy. Trump lashed out at Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell in a post on social media Thursday that hinted at potentially dismissing the central bank leader, one day after Powell warned that the Fed could face a difficult trade-off as tariffs raise prices and weaken the economy. Inflation in the U.S. could rise more than in other countries in the coming months because Trump has imposed a range of tariffs. Trump has previously said he won't seek to replace Powell before his term expires in May 2026. In a Bloomberg television interview on Monday, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reaffirmed his support for the Fed's independence in setting interest rates, saying it's a jewel box that has to be preserved. And again, we'll see if Scott Bessent stays true to this because, of course, he ultimately serves Donald Trump and serves at the pleasure of Trump. And it certainly defies Trump's overall goals. He believes that the Federal Reserve Chairman should be beholden to him. And I'll also point out that, again, Trump appointed Powell. That's the irony in all this. Powell is a Trump appointee. And then Powell was reaffirmed by President Biden, okay? And a lot of people criticize that decision. Like, I think it was Elizabeth Warren criticized that decision, said that somebody should be replaced, but Biden stuck with Powell. But again, Trump wanted Powell during the COVID pandemic in 2020 to change interest rates because it was an election year, and Trump wanted the economy to do as well as possible, or at least wanted to be seen as directing the economy to do as well as possible so it wouldn't hurt him politically. And Powell did not succumb to Trump's pressure. And that is where Powell really got on Trump's shit list, so about 5 years ago. So we'll continue. Trump's tariff announcements led to notable market volatility last week, including a rare episode in which longer-term bond yields rose while the dollar weakened. Trump on Thursday called on the Fed to lower interest rates immediately, shortly before the European Central Bank cut its key rate a quarter point as expected. Powell should have lowered interest rates. Again, we read that quote. The Fed has held interest rates steady at both of its meetings this year. After the central bank left its benchmark rate unchanged at its meeting in January, Trump said he agreed with the decision because inflation was still a concern. Setting interest rates to cushion the economy from a so-called supply shock that limits the ability of the economy to produce goods and services is a particularly challenging situation for central banks. A trade war could initially send up prices while also weakening demand and eventually pushing up unemployment. In such a situation, anything the Fed does with interest rates to restrain inflationary pressures could worsen unemployment, and anything it does to stimulate the economy and cushion the blow to the job market could send up inflation. So a catch-22. The Bank of Canada, which held interest rates steady on Wednesday after 7 consecutive cuts, highlighted the tension in its policy statement. Quote, monetary policy cannot resolve trade uncertainty or offset the impacts of a trade war, it read. Trump's erratic policy announcements have also chilled business and consumer sentiment, which can hamper investment. Business executives say that they aren't willing to invest until they have more clarity about what their cost structure will be. And again, this is why it's so damn important for Donald Trump to be consistent. Again, imagine a universe in which Donald Trump actually follows through with everything he says and there is no inconsistency in the global trade war. That would be bad enough. It would be bad enough if he actually consistently applied these ridiculously punitive, widespread global tariffs. But in a way, what Trump is doing is even worse because what he's doing now is inconsistent policy has much of the harm of that and also the additional harm of inconsistency, which is going to chill investment and going to chill economic growth. So he's burning the candle at both ends. The correct thing to do would be consistent in not applying sweeping global tariffs. Consistently don't do that, right? If you're going to do tariffs, make them targeted, rational, and consistent. But that's not Trump. So the Wall Street Journal again notes that Trump appointed Powell to lead the Fed in 2018 and President Biden reappointed him in 2022 with 80 senators approving his second term. But Trump quickly soured on Powell, who became a presidential favorite scapegoat for not lowering interest rates fast enough during the 2019 trade war and again, the 2020 COVID situation. Again, it says that, what we saw in the clip, which is Powell's not concerned about political independence. It notes that Trump has attempted to dismiss several other Biden appointees who have challenged their removal by arguing they can't be fired over a policy dispute. Trump's Justice Department has said it would seek to overturn a 1935 legal precedent that has protected presidential appointees at regulatory agencies from dismissal over policy disputes. That court ruling has long been cited as the primary guardrail supporting Fed independence. And I'll also point out this is a major element of Project 2025. Conservatives want to radically reshape the executive branch into the president's personal fiefdom, as long as it's a conservative president, as long as it's a Republican president, as long as it's a MAGA president. The Democrats in charge, well, then they want everything to be as decentralized and protected from a Democratic president as much as possible because they're unprincipled, hypocritical losers. But this is fully commensurate with Project 2025. They told us what they wanted to do. They want to bring every agency under the aegis of the President of the United States and make it a personal fiefdom so that you don't need cause. It can be crony capitalism. It can be, the kind of corrupt, I'm blanking on the term, but where presidential appointees, it was just basically graft. It was favors. It was out of loyalty, not out of competence. And the government, as problematic as the government can be from time to time, as many mistakes as the government might make, it is infinitely superior to what it was before these protections were put into place, where presidents just appointed people based on loyalty and fired people based on perceived disloyalty. You want competent stewards of the government, especially because the government transitions all the time. Every 4 to 8 years, we have a new government. Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican. You want consistent bureaucrats who have the competence and experience to keep shit humming along during these transitions. Now, does the president have a lot of latitude over the executive branch? Yes, and he should. I don't dispute that. But you don't want any single president to have absolute total day-to-day control of every single aspect of the federal government. That makes no sense. It's incredibly dangerous. And Republicans wouldn't want that either if the shoe was on the other foot. Be consistent, be principled. So, for Powell, the unsavory prospect of a legal showdown, one he might have to pay for out of his own pocket, was imperative to preserve the ability of future Fed chairs to serve without the threat of being removed over a policy dispute. So, because it says 6 years ago when Trump toyed with trying to dismiss Powell, the Fed leader told then Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin that he would fight his removal if the president sought it. Okay, so again, he was willing to do it. The Fed has guarded its independence to set monetary policy ever since the very high inflation of the 1970s. President Nixon privately pressured his Fed chairman and former advisor, Arthur Burns, to ease policy ahead of the 1972 election. Again, because another corrupt Republican president, not that corruption doesn't exist in the Democratic Party, but it's much more prevalent in the Republican Party, and the most corrupt presidents in modern history have been Republicans. After years of high inflation were cured by a punishing recession in the early 1980s, the Fed and other central banks around the world sought and were granted considerable operational autonomy or independence by their governments to set interest rates with an eye toward the long-term good of the economy. So, yeah, this is, again, what Trump is trying to single-handedly overturn. This is not good. And I don't know where the Supreme Court will come down on this, because recent Supreme Court decisions have been in line with the Project 2025 agenda, in the sense that, like the Chevron decision, which was overturned, right? As well as others as well, where they're trying to weaken the protections of executive agencies to make them a more personal fiefdom of the President of the United States. And there's a 6-3 conservative supermajority that might be ideologically predisposed to do it. But my hope is that they're going to think, okay, would we want Democrats to be able to do the same thing? And that'll be the real test of a person's principle. But there you go. Donald Trump is pissed off. He's publicly lashing out, suggesting that he would unlawfully fire a man whom he appointed to that position in the first place. And I just love how unflappably cool Jerome Powell is about this. Like, yeah, I'm not worried about it. And no, I'm not going to succumb to pressure, period. We'll see what happens. But in the meantime, please let me know what you think in the comments.